Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre, Whitney Pier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. WCB is one of those areas that is near and dear to my heart, and the fact that the Minister is right when she talks about it needing a comprehensive review. And this is one step forward, and our caucus is very glad to see. And I want to thank the Minister and the staff for the work on this. Madam Speaker, we are the only province in the country that doesn't have these protections. These changes are going to be meaningful for so many people in the workplace. But there's lots of work to do. And I'm glad this government has taken this step. But I do hope to see those bigger changes in WCB that the Minister's talked about with a full comprehensive review, because there is an array of issues with WCB, and they're not limited to what I'm going to list, but these are a few of those problems that many face with WCB. Gaps in support and mandate for psychological health and safety, and again, as we're about to deal with this, is the onset stress claims. Inadequate subcontractor coverage, lengthy appeals processes, interactions with other benefits such as private insurance, and the GIS OAS, time limits for submitting claims, accessible earning caps, conflicting medical expertise. Madam Speaker, as the Minister alluded to in her conversation about a full comprehensive review, these are some of the things that need to be changed in WCB. These are some of the problems that are facing so many, that are causing a number of our constituents to consider MAID. I have a few in my constituency who are no longer within my constituency because they live in Dominion, but they are dealing with this on an everyday basis of if they can take one more step, if they can deal with this with the WCB problems one more day, and how it's affecting their health, their physical and mental, and their bodies are breaking down because of these issues, and many of them are just choosing MAID, which is, and it's sad, but it's changes we could make. We've opened it up. Here we are. We've got another amendment to WCB. We could open it up, and we could fix these issues. And while I have the Minister's ear here, I'm sure, and I know the Minister listens often to these issues, I want to draw her attention also to a bill that I present in this legislature on automatic assumption for PTSD for child welfare frontline workers, Madam Speaker. And I hope she takes that brings that back as well at some point.
Order.
Yes?
Order. I'd like to remind the member from Cape Breton Centre, Whitney Pier, to your comments are to be around this bill, not a previous bill that was put forward. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre, Whitney Pier.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker. I assumed it was related, considering that the Minister also alluded to this in her speech as well. So I was answering back to the Minister on it, so I'm very sorry for that. The other thing I'd like to talk about that with regards to this bill is one of the, we talk of the bill is discussing issues, I believe it says unless the conflict constitutes harassment or bullying, so that's dealing with things that are excluded from the workplace. And the one thing I would say that creates a healthy workplace and can avoid the gradual stress as well as traumatic experiences would be to not allow the misuse of NDAs in the workplace as well. In this, the bill also seems to exclude, it says it will exclude workplace stress stemming from performance management, termination of employment, change to job description, and interpersonal conflict, unless that conflict constitutes harassment or bullying. And I do not, the minister might correct me, but I don't think we dealt with psychological harm in a bill yet. So my question is, why were these things exempt when they cause a lot of stress and trauma for many people? When you are having interpersonal conflicts with people in your workplace, when and yet we still don't really have definition for bullying and harassment in the workplace. So how is that how do we exclude workplace stress stemming from performance management, termination of employment, change in job description, and interpersonal conflict, unless that conflict constitutes harassment or bullying, when we don't have a full scope of what psychological harm bullying in the workplace is? So I'm hoping that the minister, in her closing statements, can explain how these exemptions in the bill were arrived at and how they're going to deal with the other exemption of harassment or bullying in the workplace, and who was consulted on them. So I also want to say I look forward to hearing from more stakeholders at law amendments on this bill, and I don't want to be seated until I again reiterate that this is a good step forward, and I look forward to seeing more steps on WCB to make positive change for the constituents that I represent, as well as for all workers in Nova Scotia. Thank you.
I recognize the honourable member for Cumberland North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I just want to add a couple of comments to this bill in second reading. And I first of all want to say thank you to the minister for bringing this bill forward, and I applaud her work. I know this has come up many times here in this legislature, and it is so needed. So through you, Madam Speaker, I just want to say thank you to the minister. I'm sure I'm not alone in this House, that I have constituents right now that are going through very difficult times in their employment through WCB, because the trauma that they've experienced in the workplace is not recognized and not being honored, and steps are not being taken to provide them with a supportive workplace. And I'm hoping that this is going to change with this bill passing. And a couple of my questions to the minister through you, Madam Speaker, would be what steps will the minister take in the department to ensure that there is education around trauma, to help people better understand, managers in particular that are managing staff, help them to better understand the definition of trauma, the effects of trauma, and how that can impact people in the workplace. So we all know here in this legislature we can put forth the best legislation and policy possible, but if the strategy is not put in place to ensure that education is done once the bill leaves this House, and the proper strategy and steps are not put in place, then it doesn't actually create the positive changes that we want to see. So I'm hoping that education will be a very big part of this bill after it passes. And then my last comment is I will agree with the member from Cole Harbour that I echo her comments in that if there is any way possible of expediting this bill and moving the dates forward so that we're not waiting a year before this bill takes effect. Again, I'm sure I'm not alone, that I can assure the minister that I have people right now that are going through very difficult time in their life because this legislation is not in place right now. And the trauma that they've experienced in the workplace is not being recognized by WCB, and they're expected to go into workplace situations that actually trigger the past trauma, and that makes their mental illness or mental health worsen. That's not helpful. And we need to be doing all that we can to provide supportive, healthy workplaces. And I would love to see this bill happen sooner, as does the member from Cole Harbour. With those few words, I'll take my seat, and thank you, Madam Speaker.
If I am to recognize the Honorable Minister for Skills, Labor, and Immigration. It will be to close debate on second reading. Bill number 332, Workmen's Compensation Act, and Act to amend. I recognize the Honorable Minister for Labor, Skills, and Immigration.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank all my colleagues for their comments and remarks on this bill and for their support. We know that, as it's been mentioned, WCB is a complicated system, and it's time that we take the time to look into it and make further changes. So it has been said, but this is the first step, Madam Speaker. This is the first step to be able to make this particular change to include gradual onset stress as a compensable injury, but knowing that it is following consultations that will be happening. So I will make sure that the members with their questions get the answers into third reading, but I think it's just important that we acknowledge that it's, again, this is a system that hasn't been looked at in over 2 decades, so in 2002. But I hear from Nova Scotians, and I know everyone in this room also hears from folks who have experienced gradual onset stress, and it is now the time to be able to introduce this as a compensable injury. And so I do appreciate the support. We also have to work closely with WCB, so I do acknowledge, of course, the timeline is a concern for some folks as it's not fast enough, but we do have to work with WCB. Being able to enable this to happen, now they can do their work. They have to hire staff, they have their own consultations to put policies in place to really tighten up what happens next. So being able to work with them, that's really where the timeline came from. But I just want to close with some of those remarks, Madam Speaker, that it is the time for change. We've got new leadership at the WCB, the department is listening, and it's time that we go where this government wants to go and support Nova Scotians in mental health. So with those remarks there, Madam Speaker, I close debate on Bill 332.
The motion is to close a second debate, reading bill of number 332, Workmen's Compensation Act. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill 332, an act to amend Chapter 10 of the Acts of 1994-95, the Workers' Compensation Act.
Order that this bill be referred to the Standing Committee on Law Amendments. I recognize the Honorable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 332?